Alright guys, so now we will get into a bit of configuration and demo part, right? So the first one which we will tackle is basically the Hotspot portal, right? Remember, in Hotspot portal, we are not going to ask the user for any username and password, right? We are basically going to give him access as soon as he connects. So we'll see how that is done. Topology remains the same, switch, and you have the ISE and domain controller, and this is my client PC, right? So let's get to it. Let's go to ISE, work centers. Let me show you the guest access overview. So these are like very stepwise detailed. They have given you very standard steps on how to configure. So if you are stuck somewhere, you can just go about doing this. Preparation, define, and then you can configure the whole stuff. But let me just directly go down to the settings to start with. That's just for your reference, right? Don't have to follow each and every step which is mentioned there. Settings. So whatever settings you do here kind of will be applicable to all the portals, right? We'll probably be discussing like 4 portals, guest and sponsor and self-service with sponsor and so on. So these settings are kind of applicable to all of them. If you want to get rid of your guest endpoints, on a daily basis, you can configure that here, or you can immediately do it as well just by clicking the purge now button. Custom fields is basically as and when we create new portals, right? We would basically need some extra fields, custom fields. So this is where you define. For example, I have defined something like person waiting, a string, and the name of the person and so on, right? So person visiting, the person, like when you're visiting a branch or something, you would want to you'll be the client, and basically there'll be some sponsor who will be letting you in, right? So this is a very simple example of that. I'll show you where we'll be using such kind of stuff. SMTP server you can set up just by clicking this. I'm not going to do this because it's a lab, but you can set up a SMTP server, and you can make ISE kind of like send emails using that SMTP server, for all the passwords, expiration, details and all of that. Locations and SSIDs, just the place where you put in your locations of the users, guest users coming into your network. SSID, so if you are not doing anything in wireless, but if you were doing in wireless, then you will have to pick the SSID of from your where is that, WLAN, right? From your WLC, you'll have to pick the SSID. This is basically, you can make these SSID available for sponsors to select when they create the guest account. So we are basically making the sponsor portal kind of like available only via this SSID. So you can do that setting here. Remember, we are not doing anything in wireless, we are doing everything in wired. Though obviously it's very rare you will see anyone using guest for wireless, for wired. But since it's very difficult to, I don't think you can emulate wireless using Eve, so that's why I'm just showing everything using wired, right? But the process almost remains the same for wireless as well. The username policy, the password policy, you can do changes here. You can basically tell what kind of passwords has to be generated, what are the characters it needs to have, and so on. Cool. So that's mainly the settings. That being said, we can quickly move on to give me a second. So let's move on to the policy stuff now. So before we go down to the policy sets, let me show you the downloadable ACLs and the authorization profiles which I have created for this guy, for the Hotspot. Right, for downloadable ACLs, let's see. So you have ACL called ISE only. So what this ACL does is, I think by now you know, right? So you'll basically have 2 authorization policies, right? The first authorization policy is going to be mainly for redirecting the user traffic to the ISE portal, and after that the second authorization policy is basically to elevate the privileges once the user has put in the right password or accepted the policy and so on. So this is the first this is the ACL which will be used in the first policy, where the user has just connected, or the client has just connected to the network, but we don't want to allow any kind of traffic from the client yet. So we are denying everything except your DNS. See, the domain is the DNS one, boot PS is your DHCP, and then obviously traffic towards the ISE, right? Because all my DNS and all the services are basically there on that domain my portal is on the ISE at the end of the day, so that's why we are allowing that as well, right? So that's mainly with respect to the, let me just click on OK. Yeah, so that was one of the downloadable ACL. The other one which I want to show you is the second downloadable ACL, which gets downloaded on the box once the user has put in the correct password, and once we have authenticated the user, right? Or maybe the user has accepted the policy, the AUP policy, right? So this is the second downloadable ACL. I'll show you where these actually come into play. So these are the two ACLs. This is basically preventing any guest user from doing a ICMP ping to the domain controller, right? And it is allowing every other traffic, right? Pretty straightforward. I just put in a simple example here, because when a guest connects to your network, you would want to give him or her only internet access. You don't want to give them access to any internal resources. So that's why I put in a deny statement here. Now going back to our authorization profiles, your downloadable ACLs have no meaning if they are not assigned or if they are not attached to any authorization profiles, right? So that's where we'll basically use this. So first one is the hotspot access. So this is the first authorization profile which will kick in, where look at here, we have used the DACL which I showed you earlier, the ISE only DACL, and the second one is the because we are talking now about the hotspot, so you can see you got to select hotspot here, and this is the ACL which is connected on the box. So this is the ACL which is configured on the box, right, on your switch. So the name should exactly match. I'll quickly show you, give me a second, right? So here you can see this is the access list I was talking about, right? So from here you can clearly understand that this is the downloadable ACL. Let me just put it once again. Yeah. So what you see from here is that we are trying, the permit lines over here basically are trying to match any kind of HTTP or HTTPS traffic, right? So when it finds any of such kind of a traffic, it is going to trigger that redirection URL. So always remember that the redirect ACL will not permit or deny any traffic. This is just there to kind of only map, only match the traffic which has to be redirected. So here HTTP and HTTPS will be redirected, whereas the rest of all the traffic will be denied, right? So it has nothing to do with permitting and denying traffic as such, right? So that's the same ACL, and the name has to match, so that's why be careful here. And the portal, this is basically the place where you kind of like put in the name of the hotspot portal which you created, right? I'll spend few minutes on this portal. I'll show you where to create this, but for now just remember that this is where you select your hotspot. You have many other options. You have CWA and all, which we will probably use later, but for now select hotspot, select put in the redirect ACL so that the traffic, the HTTP traffic, will get redirected to the to the hotspot portal. And here you will basically have all the portals which you would have created. You just need to select the portal, right? So that being said, let me quickly also show you the policy sets, and then we could finally wrap it up by showing you the portal itself, how to create the portal, right? So that'll be pretty cool. Okay, give me a second. All right, so this is basically same from my previous video, right? This is a policy set called wired. You go inside that, you will basically find the authentication policy. The only interesting thing to remember here is, let me actually move my map up here. Right, so what you see here is wired map and wired.1x, which you probably would have seen 100 times by now, but only thing which you need to remember here is in the options section, right? Because just understand this, the users who are coming into a network, right, the guest users, they really are not part of our organization. So they don't have a .1x credentials, their MAC addresses are not part of the AD, or they are not part of our internal identity source. So they are bound to fail. This authentication is bound to fail, right? So that is why always change this second option which is here, right? So if user is not found, what do you want ISE to do? You want ISE to continue, because they are bound to fail here, but we will capture that in the authorization policy. So this is one change which you have to do. Do it for both your .1x and map, so that if a user is trying to connect to your network, and if they are not if they are not part of your ID source, then this will get kicked in, and if because it is continue, now this will come down over here to the authorization policy. And on the authorization policy, you can see I've done a couple of things here. So I've defined two authorization policies. One is hotspot access, other one is the guest access. So this is what I was telling. There are two authorization policies which kick in. The first one is this one. Why? Because you can see the you can see the conditions here, right? It's either wired map or wired .1x. Basically, because of this, it's going to come down here. And here on the authorization profile, I've selected the profile which I created earlier, right? Which I showed you, hotspot profile. Hotspot, which had a downloadable ACL which is ISE only, and it also had the CWA redirection, right? Once this one succeeds, right, which means the user logs into that new ISE portal and probably accepts the policy, then the second authorization policy will kick in. And observe the condition here for the second policy. It basically tells that this should kick in only if the endpoint has now entered the guest endpoints identity group, right? So I'll show you where you'll basically see this. So when we do the when we set up the demo portal, right, when we set up the hotspot portal, we are basically telling the user's MAC address to be added to this particular endpoint identity group, right? So we are using that as our we are using that as a condition here, and telling that, okay, if the user is now, or if the MAC address is now part of this particular endpoint, then provide him elevated access, right? So the guest access is basically that permit internet, right, which I showed you in the downloadable ACL or the profiles, right? So that gets kicked in. So that's pretty much straightforward, I would say. Nothing very complicated in the policy sets. Now let me show you the portals. So you go down to guest access, go down to portals, right? So here you can create your demo portals, right? So by default, you'll actually have these guys. I believe you'll have these three default given to you. You can just take them and edit them, or you can just create something new by clicking on create, right? In my case, because we are doing the video on, we are doing the lab on hotspot portal, you'll have to select this and click on continue. I'm gonna cancel this because I've already created one here. I'm gonna just show you the configs under it. Alright, so you give a name for your portal over here, and basic configurations, right? There are two things here. On the left hand side, you basically do your technical configurations. On the right hand side, this is mainly for customizing your portal. If you don't want, or if you want to change how it looks, like you have an editor kind of a view here, right? So you can see here there is a view of how it is looking. There's a preview, right? So as and when you change, probably you can change the logo, you can change the banner, you can change the text which appears, you can change this policy and so on. So as and when you change stuff here, it will reflect here. I'm not going to do anything much here because it's just a lab. I'll keep the demo, the default one. But under the portal behavior settings, you can do some changes, like you can go down to the portal settings. By default, it will be running on the HTTPS port. The interface is here. All of this, the endpoint group, right? This is what I was telling. If the first authorization policy succeeds, what happens is that MAC address gets added to the guest endpoints. You can create your own identity store and kind of change this as well if needed. Apart from that, you have COA enabled. COA is important because it has to re-authenticate, right, or elevate the access if the first authorization policy is passed. So that's there. Pretty much similar to that, a bunch of settings here. This is AUP is basically the acceptable use policy, right? You want that policy to be mentioned on the registration portal, on the hotspot portal, then you can include this. Similarly, you can also include something like a support page, right? So I've included a support page where if the user is facing issues with the connectivity to a network, they can click on the support page and get some information, right? So all of that is pretty straightforward. There's nothing to save here, so let's close this. So that was mainly on the portal. So these are the only configurations which you will have to do. Obviously, you'll have to add your NAT device, which we have added, the switch one long time back. But apart from that, you'll have to just do configurations under your guest, access here. Probably check the settings, probably create your portals, and then go down to your policy, elements. Go down to your results, create your DACLs, create your authorization profiles. Go to policy sets and configure authentication authorization policies. Cool. So let me refresh this and we should be good to configure, good to test. The only problem is since we are doing this in Eve, there might be some features which might not exactly work as expected. So but I'm pretty sure this will work properly if you are doing in a actual physical hardware, right? So anyway, so this is the switch. What we'll do is first let's check if the switch port is up. Show IP interface brief. Yep, looks like the Ethernet 1/0 is my port on which the client is connected. That looks up. Let's actually turn on debug radius just to see if the radius is going through, right? So that's pretty good. Now let's go and see. Right now if I do IP config, I shouldn't have any IP address because the this is disabled. So let's enable this. When you enable that, it will try to authenticate, right? So there you go, the authentication request is going. I can see it. Let's observe this, what is happening here. So if I do show auth sessions, there you go, already the authentication session is up. If I do interface Ethernet 1/0 details, I'll see some cool stuff. You can see on the output of this command here, the most important stuff, you have the URL redirect, right? The URL is mentioned here, and the redirect URL is basically nothing but the hotspot portal. This is the hotspot portal, and you can see the ACL redirect is also mentioned here, right? So that's why you need to exactly mention the same name on your configuration. So here now I can see show access list probably. Yeah, there you go. So you have the exact same name and this is your ACL redirect. Apart from that, there is also another ACL which is being pushed, which is the dynamic ACL, right? So this dynamic ACL is basically telling my, you can see here, where is that? The dynamic ACL should be, okay, so there's a lot of logs, give it a second. Yeah, there you go. This is my dynamic ACL, right? So dynamic ACL is basically permitting only access to the DHCP and DNS and obviously to my ISE, but rest everything it is denying, right? So so that the user doesn't have any access until he is authenticated. Now the problem here is because this is like I said, the images, the virtual images, right, at least the ones which I'm using, they don't support things like IP device tracking and DHCP snooping and all of that, which is very much required for the dynamic ACLs to work properly. So that's why I'll have to do a little bit of manual work, which means I can't expect the browser to do the redirect for me. I'll have to just pick the URL from here and redirect it myself. So that's a bit of a hassle because I'm just testing this, right? So it doesn't matter, but in an actual environment, this should work automatically. So in my case, I'm just going to plug in my, let's go and do this. So let's put in the URL here. Before that, while that is happening, we can also see if this guy has received an IP address. There you go, 172.16.32.3. It has received an IP address, which looks good. And there you go, I can see in the backend, the URL is trying to load. Okay, there you go, we have the acceptance page. So this is the policy, right? You can change all of this however you want. I have kept everything as common for now. I've also defined an access code in my portal, right? So I'll have to put in the access code, otherwise it will not work. So 0876, I guess. So I'll tell you the use of this access code, right? Like, let's say you are deploying this guest service for a cafe and you don't want random people walking on the road to access your internet, then you can probably put this access code inside your cafe where it is visible for people only when they enter, and then they can connect to the network only with this, right? So because if I put in something wrong, right, let's say let me put something wrong, it will immediately tell that it's an invalid access code and I'll not be able to connect to the network, right? So that's one thing. If I click on contact support, it is this is the other stuff which I was showing you there. You can again customize this, but I have kept everything basic. So look at this, it is telling me the MAC address, the IP address, the agent from where I'm trying to connect and so on. So I can use this information when I'm raising a ticket and stuff, right? So for now, let me go and put in the right code. 130876. Good. There you go. It got connected. Now let's do a bit of connecting to the internet like Yahoo. So that should try to connect. Give it a few seconds. Meanwhile, let's also see. I should not be able to connect to because of that second dynamic ACL, right? The internet only. This particular device should now have access only to internet, right? And that's why I should not be able to connect to the domain controller. So if I do ping 172.16.32.40, there you go. See, I'm not able to ping here because that's my domain controller. Because of the dynamic ACL, I'm not able to ping, right? Whereas the internet is working fine. So this was mainly what I wanted to show you with the respect to the hotspot portal, right? The hotspot configuration and the hotspot guest service. Okay. Let me just show you the logs on the ISE as well. You can see what has happened here. The user first came in as hotspot, right? So the authentication was MAP and the authorization was hotspot access, right? The first authorization policy got kicked in, and after that, after the user was redirected and after the user accepted the policy, a COA, a change of authorization was sent, and then you can see the second authorization policy has kicked in, right? The guest access has kicked in, and you can also see that particular device was now put into what the guest endpoints identity group, right, which is in line with our second authorization policy. So the second authorization policy kicked in, and because of that, finally the session was created, right? So that's mainly I wanted to just show you that as well, to see how the multiple authorization policies are playing together here. So let's move on to the second one, which is basically what is it? Self-registration, right? So you might have seen in some cases, especially in airports, right, or in malls, you might you will have to create your own account, and then you probably get the credentials emailed to you or sent you via an SMS, which you can then leverage to connect to internet, right? So that's basically something which we are going to, that's basically called as self-registration, right? So let's get to it. Pretty simple, straightforward, right? So the guest access overview page, this is where I am. Let's quickly jump down to the portals. Now on the portals page, you will basically find me, so this is where we created our demo hotspot portal as well, right? So similarly, I have created, by clicking on create, I have created one more portal. Let's go get into that. That's basically the self-registration portal which I have created. Looks like it's loading. All right, that looks good. This is something which I probably missed telling out in the previous video. It's a very interesting, workflow which tries to tell you the various, web pages involved, and how each of those web pages are kind of like working together, the loops and all of that, right? Pretty cool stuff. Anyway, so the customization part, I'm not going to go into that because I've already showed you in the previous one, right? In the hotspot creation video, it's going to be pretty much the same. You are free to play around with customization. On this page, I think a bunch of things probably because we are this is basically self-registration, right? And so let me just take you through a bunch of stuff here, right? So let's probably go down to the portal settings here. The portal will still run on the HTTPS port 8443. You can select different interfaces if you want. You can see the guest portal sequence. This is nothing but your identity store sequence. I could show you probably that. You can change that if you want, but probably not gonna help much because, like I said, in our case, the endpoint users are generally not inside, right? The guests are not in our network, so they'll not be present in any of our identity sources. So it's very rarely used. It load probably. Okay, so yeah, this is the place where you can like click on any of these and you can probably change the order in which the entity sources are basically consumed. Okay, login page, over in here in the login page you can put in stuff like the AUP policy, right? This is where you can request access code as well on top of username and password. I've disabled it, I really don't want that. You can put the AUP policy, right? You're basically telling, you know, the user will have to, when they are logging in, they'll have to accept the policy, right? And bunch of settings corresponding to that. Under the registration form settings, you can define what is required, what is mandatory, right? The username, password. This is basically we are collecting information from our user. So that's there, and define the locations from where the users are basically going to be connected. The SMS, right? If you want to integrate some SMS providers, there are a bunch of them which are supported here. So you can integrate so that, you know, the users will basically get SMSs as well. Custom fields, right? The ones which we had defined in the previous video, we can leverage if you want. The success page is here. What else? So guest device registration, where is that? Okay, here. Let's look at that. So this is the interesting piece here. Automatically register, you know, guest devices, because it's self-registration, right? And allow guests to register extra devices as well. So this is another interesting piece. So if the guests want to kind of register maybe another device, right? Let's say they have a printer, right? And they want to register that and give internet access, because you can only follow the web authentication method only if the device has some kind of a console, right? Or some kind of a web browser, because it's all browser based, right? You need to have a browser to at least load that authentication page. But if you are using a printer, how do you give internet connection to it? You will not be able to. So that's where you can use this option to kind of register it, you know, from another device, right? So that's pretty cool. Then obviously the support page, right? I've showed you in the previous one as well. You can enable this so that, you know, you can let your users collect some useful information before opening a support case. Coming to the this thing, I don't have to show you probably the results. Yeah, there'll be a slight change with respect to authorization profiles, right? Nothing else changes. The DACLs will remain the same. Only the authorization profiles, I have created another authorization profile called as self-registration access here. And the DACL will still remain the same, only the web authentication part will change, right? So here I have changed from hotspot to CWA now. The redirection ACL will remain the same, and obviously change this to the portal which you really want to kind of redirect to, right? You are redirecting it to the demo portal, so that's why you select that. Cool, so that's pretty cool. Let's go to the policy sets, the last part. Again, no much changes over there. You'll have to just you know, the first authorization policy you'll have to change. The second authorization policy will still remain the same. All of this also remains the same, right? From the previous video, the authentication still remains the same. It's the same logic. We are expecting .1x and map to fail, but when it fails, we are not dropping the request. Rather, we are continuing and we are you know, handing over the session to this guy, right? So here you see the previous one which we had used, hotspot access. I have kind of like disabled it. I mean, I don't want that to be acted upon, right? I want the self-registration, which is exactly similar to this. Only the difference is I have selected the self-registration profile which I showed you earlier instead of the hotspot access, right? That's pretty cool. So now let's go and test this. So let's refresh this here, and that's good. So which means we are good here. Yeah, the debugs are there. Let's go and enable this guy. Right, so we have enabled him. Give me a second. All right, so I've enabled it. Let's go and see what has happened here. Similar to the previous guy, show auth sessions. You can see the ACL is available now, and you know, this is the DACL preventing the client from accessing anything else and allowing only the traffic towards the ISE. And this is the you know, URL, which, you know, sadly I'll have to manually put it, because I think it's an issue with all these virtual systems. Virtual images especially doesn't work as expected. Before I'll do that, let me also show you what has happened here on my ISE. You should see, you can see the first authorization policy has kicked in, which is self-registration access, right? And it is waiting for the user to kind of load this. Did I copy everything correctly? I hope so. Yep, that's good. So let's go down here. Let's click on this. Now you should see this guy loading the page. Look at this page. It's slightly different when compared to the hotspot one. Here you have the username and password, but currently we don't know the username and password, right? So we have to create one. So let's create on. Let's click on register. I don't know. I think I'd registered with account called Harry before. Let me create something called Tom. Right, so you can make any of these fields compulsory as well. You can select the location from where the user is connecting. I'm just gonna skip all of this and just gonna click on register. Do not let me know. Okay, so I think I need more, right? So let's do Tom 2020. That's a good thing. So you can put in such kind of checks as well. So that's good. There you go. So the username and password has been created. I can probably quickly copy this to a notepad so that I don't forget this. There you go. And now let's click on sign on. And when I do that, I'll have to put in this username and I'll have to put in the password. All of this got automatically created, right? I did not have to do that. So there you go. I'll have to accept it and sign on. So when I do that, this is the place where it's asking me, do you want to add any additional devices, right? Register devices. If I want to register a printer or a scanner and so on. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to skip that. And there you go. So welcome, continue to connect to the network. When I click on continue, I have access now. So let's try that. Yahoo. There you go. Yahoo works. Give it a second. Yeah, I can see it loading. And the same thing as previous, right? We should not be able to ping whom? The domain controller, because we have put another DACL over there, the second DACL. So it's 172.16, I think 32.40, right? That shouldn't work. Okay, so that's mainly it, guys. So that was related to your self-registration portal, right? So we did hotspot portal, we did the self-registration portal. And okay, let's also check the logs from the, let's look at the change in the logs, right? Now that we have authenticated, you should see the second log come in. There you go. So we can see now guest access has come in, which is the authorization profile has switched from here to the guest access. Because of the COA, even on our device, we should be able to see that, right? If I do something like show auth sessions, you'll no longer see the redirect URL. Rather, you'll see the second, ACL visible here. Okay. So hope that was clear. That's mainly with respect to self-registration portal. Alright guys, let's move on to the next variant of self-service. So this is basically self-service which has to be approved by a sponsor, right? So earlier in self-service, in the previous one, we created a username and password. We ourselves did it and we used them to authenticate, into the guest portal. But this time we will we will just register, and then it is up to the sponsor to kind of approve or reject it. So that's something which we'll check out. So coming back to ISE, if I go down to my, let's go down to the guest portals. So what I've done is I've created the demo self-registration sponsor, right? A new one. And under this, let's have a look at what's happening. Right, name for the portal, pretty straightforward. The rest of the configs remain same as the previous one, except there's a small change. I believe it should be under registration, maybe. SMS provider. So this is all pretty much straightforward. I think it's maybe under self-registration. Let's check it here. Yeah, over here. Okay, it's under your registration form settings. You can see you want require guest to be approved, right? So that's important, and you need to put in a email address as well, because the notification will basically be sent to the sponsor, but then since we really don't have a SMTP server, I put in some random stuff, so that's fine. But other than that, the configuration, there's nothing changed from the previous video. It's almost the same. I've added the AOP over here, but yeah, this is much it, right? You just and obviously you have the customization feature to play around. Going back to the very next step, what we do after creating the portal, I think by now you know the format, so we got to go to the policy results. Let's see if something has changed over there. So under the authorization, sorry, not downloadable ACL, the authorization profiles, I've created a new profile called self-registration access with the sponsor. Right over here, the DACL remains the same, only the changes under the this thing, what is that, web authentication, web redirection, my bad. So under web redirection, we'll have to put the centralized CWA, right? We'll have to select CWA here, the ACL as we have done in the previous videos, and here you'll have to select the portal which you want to use. In our case, we want to use this demo self-register sponsor. And the policy sets basically undergoes the same change. We will still not change anything with respect to the second authorization policy. That will remain the same. Only the change would be with respect to the first authorization policy. Let's go down there. So the first, I have disabled the previous two which I've used. I've enabled the new one. The conditions remains the same. The only changes, the results over here, I've added the self-registration access sponsor, right? So I've added a new one over here. So that being said, pretty much we are set to test this as well. Let's go and do that. So let's refresh the stuff here. Let's see, where is our client? Our client is here, and let's see if this is pretty good. Let's see, show auth sessions. Okay, there are no sessions currently. So let's go and enable this guy. So as I enable that guy, we should start seeing radius flowing around here. Let's give it a few seconds, because it has to, as soon as you enable it, it has to go and get an IP address as well. Right, so let's wait for that. I don't see the IP address yet. Let's see what's happening here. Show auth sessions. Okay, I can see the downloadable ACL has come in, but the IP address, the DHCP has not gone in yet. So we'll have to wait for the DHCP to happen. Let's wait for a few seconds. All right, looks like we have got the DHCP now, 172.16.32.3. So let's do the same process which we have done till now. Let's go and grab that URL, right? The redirect URL, because we really can't get this to work on this virtual system. I think it's an issue with the images, I guess. But anyway, so let's get the URL to work, and this is what you get. Right, so looks almost similar to the previous self-registration portal. The only difference is, let's try to register now. So it's asking me for some stuff. Let's give a name as what, Philip, probably Philip20. Right, that'll be our user. Philip20, let's put in the first name, probably the rest of the stuff. Probably we'll have to put in an email address as well. So we'll say Philip20 at I don't know, xyz.com. Right, so let's register this one. So it's gonna give me an alert saying that the SMTP server is not configured, so the email cannot be sent. But that's fine, we know that, right? We have an issue with our SMTP. But you see, this is what you get as soon as you register. So I'm gonna say I agree, and I'm gonna sign on now. But I really don't have the username and password yet. So if I had configured email or SMS service, then I would have gotten the stuff. Not yet, because the sponsor has not yet approved it, right? So let's go down and do that. So for the sponsor to approve it, we'll have to go down to guest access, manage accounts. And over here, let's click on the manage accounts page. There you go, the page is loading. All right, looks like it has loaded. This is what you see. You also can create your own accounts, but in my case, I'm probably going to go down to the pending account. So this is where, as a sponsor, there is a tab here which allows me to go and approve any of the pending requests. All right, so you can see this. Actually, let me click on this one and let's see the various stuff which is there under it. Right, there you have, the username, password, and all of that. Let me just grab all of this and probably save it, because I would need this to then go and log into the other box, right? So let's go down here. Let's probably save it here. Okay, so that's fine. Now I have to approve this. So it's going to ask me for the sponsor's email ID. I'm just going to put this. It's probably going to give me an error, but that's fine, because I really don't have this SMTP server set up, right? So the emails would basically not go. But that's fine, I guess. All right, so there you go. All the 4 users till now we have created is visible here. Philip is the latest one. So let's go and probably log in using that. Let's go to put in the username as Philip20. The password is gonna be this one. So let's go and do that. Let's agree. Let's say sign on. And I'm gonna skip the device registration. Let's click on continue. And there you go. It's success. So let's go and try to access Yahoo. Let's do the other check which we have been doing. Let's see if we are able to do a ping to my domain controller, which shouldn't go because we have put that as a dynamic ACL, right? 16.32.40. There you go. So that is not working. We are not able to, ping is not going to the domain controller as expected, and your internet access is available, right? So that was domain, that was basically self-registration with, the approval of your sponsor, right? So that was it, guys. Hope that was useful. Oh, let's move on to the last variation of guest access, which is the sponsored guest portal. The difference here is that there'll be someone like a sponsor, right? You would have seen in the previous video, the sponsor was approving the accounts which are created by the guest. But in this case, the guest will not be able to create an account. Rather, the sponsor will have to proactively kind of create it, earlier, and then, provide it to the guest, right? So, but then when you talk about sponsor, your questions would be, who is the sponsor, right? And what are his permissions? Does he have his own portal? Yes. So we will basically go about configuring that in this video, right? So to start with, let's go back to what we have been doing. The first step would be to go to the portal components. So here you can see there is a new portal which I have created called Demo Sponsored. Pretty straightforward, I would say, like the other portals which we have created, right? You have the portal settings here, and the login page, right? By now I think you guys would have got an understanding about how to do this. I think I've put a AUP here as well, on the login page. Apart from that, yeah, pretty straightforward. I mean, nothing fancy here. You are free to play around, add more stuff, go through all the settings. You can customize it. We are not going to customize it in this one. Let's roll down to our results. Here, obviously, the only difference would be till now, like how we have done. The only difference would be going down to the downloadable ACLs, all of that remain same. I have just created another authorization profile called as sponsor, and even here the DACL will remain the same. Only the difference would be with the CWA, right? The only difference is the value of the sponsored portal would be different from the one we have created before. Here it is, demo sponsored, the one which I just now showed you, right? And coming down to the policy sets as well, the only difference you will see is that under the first authorization policy, right? Basically, I would have created a new authorization policy, right? Let's see that. Alright, so here you can see under the authorization policy, I have disabled the earlier authorization policies which I had created. I created a new one which is called sponsored, and I've added the sponsored profile here, right? But now because it is sponsored, we'll have to do one more extra step, which is playing around with the, let's go down to let's go to the portals. So we'll have to create another portal which is for our sponsor portal. So you can see on the left hand side, till now we have been playing with the guest portals. So we'll now create a sponsored portal. Before that, we could probably create a sponsored group as well, right? So you can see there are already pre-populated groups. I have just created one extra group called demo all. I think the group number 1, 3 and 4, these are ones which automatically, they come by default. So I've just duplicated one of them, and I've created a new group called demo all to be used. This is basically like a has all the information around the sponsored permissions, who are allowed to be sponsors, and what are the permissions, how long, what kind of accounts they can create, how many they can create, and all of that, right? So that's pretty much here. We will basically be using the sponsor group inside the sponsor portal, which will create by clicking here. Right, so here on the sponsor portal page, you can see I have created a demo sponsor portal. This is the new one which I have created. You will get one by default. You can just take that and duplicate it and edit it as per your requirements. Right, so here you can see pretty straightforward. This is also having a look and feel of your guest portal, but this is the sponsored portal. You can do the customizations if you want. You can see the various stuff over here, right? You can even add a FQDN name, like the fully qualified domain name, something like example.com, and then you can directly reach to that, right, using using that particular URL, right? The only thing here is something different is you're using the port 8445 when compared to the other portals. The login settings, all of this looks pretty straightforward. Nothing much of a difference here. So you also have the link here to test your portal. You can bookmark this link and keep, right, in case needed. So in our case, what do? Let's go and check what we have created, right? So I'm going to log in with the user which is present in my Active Directory, which is going to be Alice Cisco 123, I guess. That's loading, right? So this is the portal where the sponsors will basically come and create accounts. So let's go and click on random. So I've already defined kind of like a prefix, right, while doing the settings. So any usernames will have this prefix. Let me just create one account, probably a new account, right? So I can create up to maximum of 200 in one shot. So if you have like a bunch of people coming to your office, probably you can create such kind of accounts and probably print it out and give it to them, right? Then let's select the timeline. Just because I'm not sure what my other VM, the time zone of that VM is, so I'm going to be on the safer side, just select the previous day here, so that they are valid for, let's say, 5 days. Okay, there you go, we created. Okay, so that's the username password, right, which we have created. So let's kind of like go and copy this and into my other machine over here. All right, so I've copied it here. Let's click on done here. So it will take probably a couple of seconds to fully create it. All right, so looks like our new account has been created. Let's go back and enable the adapter now, right? So we should see our radius fly around here. Let's wait for a few seconds until our client gets the DHCP. Let's do show auth sessions interface Ethernet 1/0 details. Okay, I still don't see the DHCP. Let's wait for a few seconds. All right, so looks like we have received the DHCP now. which means we are good to pick that URL like how we have been doing it till now, right? Let's copy that redirection URL and let's pick this one. Like I said, you don't have to really do this in an actual network with like proper devices. This is just a trick or a hack way to get it to work in your at least the image which I have. The automatic redirection doesn't seem to happen. Cool. So it's asking me for the username. So now it's the time to go and check if this username works, the one which was created by the sponsor and provided to us. Let's pick this one. Let's click this. Let's say sign on, and there you go. It says you now have internet connection, right? Let's go and check if we can connect to Yahoo or probably YouTube. Let's do Yahoo. Right, there you go. So while that happens, let me also see if I have connectivity. I mean, I shouldn't have connectivity to domain controller. So that's 172.16.32.40. There you go. I don't seem to have it, which is in line with the dynamic ACL, with the downloadable ACL which we have put, right, as part of the second authorization policy. Cool. So that basically concludes everything I know about the guest services, right, in ISE. I think I've kind of covered almost everything, right? All various types of guest service portals which you can kind of create. So just to recap, I think before that, let me just look at the logs of Radius here. You can see, the first attempt was seen here, right? This is when the wired map authentication went in, and the sponsor authorization profile was triggered, and then the user went down to the opened the browser, and we loaded the URL, right, which is the guest URL or the guest portal, and over there we provided the username and password which was provided to us by sponsor. And once that happened, you can see the switch in the authorization profile, right? It has changed from sponsor to guest access, which is obviously elevated access, right? And meanwhile, you can see the corresponding user or corresponding client has actually been added to the guest endpoints as well over here, right? So that's mainly it, guys. Hope you liked this set of videos, I believe mainly around guest services in ISE. To summarize, we looked into 4 various variants: the hotspot portal, the self-registration, third one was the self-registration but with sponsor approved, and the last one was sponsor was the one who was basically creating the accounts and sharing it with the guest users, right? Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.